Hi, Anthony and Bob Barker are back again, and today we're going to be making this umbrella stand table. So let's get into the build. So the old umbrella stand tables that I had, they're just getting a little old, and we remodeled our backyard, and I just wanted something new to go along with the new aesthetic that we have going. So for this ones, we are using redwood, so I just went down to the box store and got some pieces that I thought would fit what I'm looking for here. So getting them all chopped down on my miter station, both the legs and all the slats that we'll be putting in. And for this one, we're just kind of going for simplicity. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I just need it really to conceal the DIY umbrella weight that I have underneath it. And I wanted the slats just going to be a little bit like thicker, and then have in between each one like ones that are thinner, just to kind of switch it up a little bit. So I'm cutting some of these down to size here on my table saw, and then of course a different day I came back later and did some more, because I'm going to end up doing 3 umbrella stand tables here. So once those are all ready, then we can get to drilling out all the pocket holes, and there was a lot of them because we're going to be using the pocket holes just to join all of these. And so that's 2 on each one of the slats, and I ended up doing like 7 slats per side, and I did so 4 sides per table. I ended up doing 3 tables, so that's a lot of drilling. That was finally done. I just did a light sanding on all of these pieces. It doesn't have to be too perfect because this is an outside table anyways, but I just wanted to make sure it was smooth enough for my liking. Then once that's done, the next step is to join it. Now first I did it the hard way here, so I wanted there to be a bit of a reveal in the front, and right here the front is facing towards me. So I put on just some pieces of plywood underneath it just to kind of get the space I wanted, and then I would clamp it in place. But then after I clamp it, to get to the pocket hole screws, I'd have to put it upside down. And I did this for a while, and I realized I'm making this way more difficult than it needs to be. What I really need to do, instead of having those spacers underneath, I just need to get the spacing that I want and put that in front and just flip the whole thing over. So it did take me a little while to figure that out, but once I did, things went much more smoothly. So you can see here I have my spacers for underneath the slat, and then also spacers to get the right spacing in between each one, and then I just kind of smash those into place, and then just use the clamps to make sure it doesn't move. And when I first started doing it, I just had the clamp resting on the pieces of wood, but then this is not the hardest wood, so then I eventually just put like little extra pieces of scrap wood there underneath that bar on the clamp, just so it doesn't dent anything as I'm doing it. And then we just kind of keep up this process, and what I'm going to be doing for these tables is I make 2 panels like this, and then after that we'll be joining the panels together. And of course that's 2 panels for each table, so ended up being 6 of those total. And then you can see there we're just about done getting this one together. And you can see that the pattern too that we were going for is not as pronounced as I wanted, because I wanted those the thicker slats a little bit bigger, but that's what was available at the box store, and I was a little too lazy to drive all the way to my lumber yard. So now that we're ready to start putting these panels together, I just got these positioning square thingies just to make it a little easier for them to stay relatively upright while I'm doing it. And then just like before, I just put my spacers in and clamp them, and then we can use those pocket hole screws to get those in place. And then after that, I just keep on going one at a time all the way down. And while I am doing this, I had to be careful just because this isn't the thickest wood. So you don't want to tighten it down too much, because if you do that, then you're going to end up splitting the wood. I did do that once or twice, so I ended up kind of scrapping a couple of those pieces, but I had a little bit of extra, so I was able to replace them. And then once we have the final slat there on bottom, you can kind of see how it's going to end up looking with 3 of the sides done. And for this one, we're just going to repeat that same process to do the 4th side. Now this was a super easy and simple design that really anybody can do, and I think it looks pretty nice in the end. And it's mainly just to hide the umbrella weight that you have underneath it, and just to give a little tabletop surface that you can set drinks or snacks or whatever else you have when you're lounging outside. So with those bases made, the next thing is to prepare for the top. Now, this is definitely not something that I have done before. This is my first time working with concrete for like furniture purposes. So forgive me if I don't do things as optimally as I should. So I did get some melamine, and we're cutting this down to do the molds. And I basically just cut it to the size so I can do all 3 molds in one piece, which I actually later kind of wish I hadn't done it that way. And we're just got some other strips that was cut off of that, and we're going to be using those to get the height that we're looking for those tabletop pieces. And I'm just putting one divider between each one of the 3 tops, and of course each on the end. And then once we have that there, we just kind of pre-drilled, countersunk, and just screwed everything thoroughly into place. So I kind of did it from the sides on all these, and I flipped it underneath and did a whole bunch there. Now for the umbrella pole to go through, we're just using these pieces of PVC pipe, and we're gonna just be fixing these to the mold, and that'll give a good spacing there. Now honestly, when I first did this, I wasn't sure how I was gonna secure them. After thinking about it a while, I figured let's just try some hot glue. So I drew out a little outline of where I wanted it to go, put the hot glue around those lines, and then just kind of smashed it into place. And it actually worked out pretty well. I was pleasantly surprised. So after that one was done, I just did all 3. And if there's any glue that came out like on the outside, I just kind of trimmed that off with a little razor blade, just so it doesn't get into the way of like my mold later. So after that was done, the next thing I got was this wire just for a little reinforcement. Honestly, as small and thin as these pieces are, I'm not actually sure if you really need it, but I kind of saw everybody else doing it online when I was researching for this, so I just went for it. Next, I did some silicone for the mold in all the corners. And the point of this is, one, just so the concrete doesn't seep out, but also when you put it in those corners and you use like those tools with a rounded edge, it'll actually give a nice round over onto the concrete. So that traced over really nice. Now, originally I was gonna just put down some tape and just use my finger to do it. But then I saw some people telling us that when you use that tool and you get those lines in there like you saw, that usually the rest of it peels off easily, and oh, it did not. It took me a couple hours actually to get all of this excess silicone caulking off. I don't know what I did wrong, so if anybody knows, please tell me. Next time I'm just gonna go with the tape instead of trying to just do it off when it's dries. But eventually, after a lot of work there, I did get it off, and it did look pretty good. So next, I just had some paste wax here, and I'm just going to use that as a release agent so the concrete comes off easy once we're demolding it. Next up is actually pouring out the concrete tops. So I went with this countertop mix. I'm not sure if it was really necessary because it definitely was more expensive than the regular other bags of concrete, but I figured why not? We'll go for it this time. And so, I just got my bag in this bin and got the amount of water and some coloring in there, mainly because I wanted to match some other concrete that we already have in the backyard. And so we start mixing it up, and it wasn't quite enough water, so I ended up having to add a little extra to this just to get it to a good consistency. But we eventually got it there, and then we can start pouring it in. So I just kind of used this shovel that I had handy, and basically I just kind of shoved some of it into the mold. Then I kind of just used a gloved hand to smooth it out, then kind of smash it in a little extra. Then once we had it about halfway, we put a little bit of that kind of wire/rebar reinforcement there. Put that into place, and then after that, then we went back and got a little bit more of the concrete to finish it off. And you can see I put some in the second one just because I put a little bit more than I intended the first part. But no big deal since we're moving on to that one now anyways. So we're just going to finish off that process for all 3 of them. Just, fill it up some, smash it down, put in the reinforcement, and then, finish it off. Now, I wasn't sure how much concrete I was going to need for all 3 of these tops. I ended up getting like 3 bags, but after I mixed up the first bag, it kind of was just about enough. So I just kind of made it kind of last for all 3 of these, and it ended up coming out okay. Then I used this extra straight board here just to kind of make sure for the first 2 that there wasn't any really big high parts. Now, I'm not really particularly worried about these looking particularly nice because it's on the underside of it, so you never really see it. Now, this is the part where I kind of wish I would have had 3 separate molds, because it came time just to kind of agitate it and to get rid of the air bubbles. And this thing was so big, it made it kind of hard to do it well. And then halfway through, I realized, I didn't level it out because it was starting to shift to one side. So popped out my level and just got a couple little scrap pieces of wood, and that was enough to get it where it needed to be. Then I just tried shaking the heck out of it too while I was at it. Now, this would have been a lot easier if it was just single molds. Then I could have actually, agitated them a bit better. But in the lesson for next time. Then I went to go cover it with plastic per the manufacturer instructions for the concrete, but then I realized as I'm doing it, all of the water that kind of was rising to the top of the concrete just started spilling out the sides here, kind of going with the plastic onto my workbench. So I just put a few little blocks of wood just to hold it right off the surface, and it worked out okay. So I let it sit for a couple days until it was set enough that way I can take it off the mold. So I took off all the plastic, and you can see there was still plenty of moisture inside there. And then it was on to taking off all of the screws I put in, which didn't realize how many I did until it was time to start taking them out, and there was quite a lot of them. But eventually I got that done, and then we can just start snapping off some of these mold pieces. And I intentionally left it long on the outside just to give me a handle so I can push it off a little easier, and for most of them it worked pretty well. Some of them, they just kind of stuck at the joints, but it was still not too bad to take off once you got by the resistance from the silicone caulking. And you can see some of the air bubbles there on the side. The tops actually came out really smooth. If I agitated more, I would have got some of those bubbles on the side off. But no big deal. The wife still liked it. And you can see those PVC pipes worked out so beautifully. They just pulled off so easily. That was probably like the best part of this mold. So there goes the top surface. And the top, like I said, it looks really nice and smooth. You just got a little bit of the pitting in the sides. But this is an outside piece in my first time, so I'm pretty happy with how it came out. So after we got that one off, we're just going to work on getting all the rest of them demolded, and those two inside ones were the most stubborn pieces, but we were able to wrestle them off, and you can see how easy, once those are off, it just slides right off. So I ended up putting these on blocks and letting them dry for a bit longer before I started messing with them a little bit more. And while I was waiting for that, then we're going to go ahead and put the finish on the bases, and I just did just a straight spar urethane on these, and that should be plenty. And of course, even that is optional with this, depending on what you're looking for. And luckily the redwood will do good outside, but even with that, the wife usually puts a cover on these anyway, so she just doesn't like them getting dirty in general. So now we're moving on to doing some sanding on this. I didn't really have anything good to squirt it, so I just grabbed a hose. And I'm just breaking off the edges on the undersurface there, just kind of working away from the corners, just so there's no sharp edges and just a little bit smoother from underneath. You're never really going to grab that anyways, but I figured might as well do that. And then I turned it around for the top side and just got like a 4 and 600 grit sandpaper and just did like a little wet hand sanding just to kind of smooth that out a little bit, and it worked out pretty nice. Now I don't want these to sit straight on the ground, so I got these just little furniture leg pads and screwed those into the bottom, and so that'll just kind of give a little bit of protection to those feet there. Then next we're back to preparing the tops to join them, and I just put these lines on the underside, that way it'll help guide it when we're joining it later. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and put some concrete sealer on it. And now I've seen some people water this down before they did it. I honestly wasn't sure because, like I said, this is the first time I'm doing this, so I just did it full strength. And I did 2 coats, and the second coat I did 90 degree direction to the first, and it came out pretty good. So anybody who has more experience with it, let me know in the comments below what's your preference and like how much of a difference does it really make for doing that. So now here we're just joining them, and what I ended up doing, I was going to use some construction adhesive, but it turns out I ran out, so I just got some more of just the silicone caulking, and I just put like a goop of it on those legs, and then we used those marks that I did earlier just to kind of get even spacing all around, and I set it on there, and it stuck pretty darn well, and of course I just wiped off a little extra. Now this is the base that I made like 10 years ago, so I just got a box store bucket and filled it in with some concrete and a PVC pipe in the middle, and it works beautifully. And once it's inside this, you'll never see it. And so there's the finished piece there, and of course there it is with an umbrella inside of it. All right, so that's the build. It came out great, and it goes really well with our new backyard. So if you're interested in this type of build, I have detailed plans below. And of course, if you like what we're doing, give us a like, subscribe, and even leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think of it, and we'll see you guys in the next one.